Hello and welcome to the very first episode 1 in a series of Planet Coaster 2 videos. The aim of those videos is going to be that we're going to start building a park from the ground up, and we're going to try and keep those videos to a decent size so that what we can do is strike a nice balance so that we can hopefully concentrate on a particular area and capture that in a video and then move through the series. So hopefully it's something that is of interest to you. You enjoy this first episode and stick with me for those future episodes. This is the first video on the new channel, so hopefully it goes down well. So let's start with setting up the park. So the first thing we want to decide is what kind of settings we want. So we're going to be using a sandbox for this. So within the sandbox there's a couple of preset options, so you can see there that we can have unlimited cache, but we don't need to research to open up any of the rides, but we do need to manage the power, the water, staff, all those kind of elements of the game, which is quite good in that you can build a park but still have some of the infrastructure behind it. There's also a couple of different options there, so we're just going to name our park YouTubers for the time being, because we want to focus on log flumes, water rides, all that kind of stuff, so it feels quite apt. So for our particular settings, we're going to use one of the preset ones where we don't have to worry about the park management aspects of the game, so we can just focus on the creative elements. And I like the tropical biome for the parks because there's a couple of little lakes or ponds that are kind of pre-installed. And here we are, welcome to our tropical paradise, untouched by man for hundreds of years, and we are going to place a water park right in the middle of it. I'm only joking. So anyway, I have done a couple of different playthroughs and I have a couple of parks currently on the go. So if you haven't had chance yet, then also on the channel is a brief tour of Planet Coaster of Amazonia, which is the water park which I'm working on. And I'm just referring to that because you'll probably see some similarities, because what I've done is through the various playthroughs I've kind of hopefully come up with a formula that works quite well. It's fairly quick, and we can hopefully for once use the whole of the park to create our theme park, because there is a limited amount of storage or data. So the more complex the things you place in your park, the quicker that's going to fill up, and it's not really about space, it's about how complex it is. And it's for that reason that we're going to focus on the landscaping options, just to create more interest than placing some of the scenery and props down and using all that memory. So as you can see here, we're using the terrain tool, and what I've done is I've just increased the size so that it can very quickly just create a bit of a feature here. So you can see even with the basic kind of landscaping tool, the pull tool, it makes it look quite interesting from the get-go actually. So we don't need to be too precious about finessing it at this particular point, and that's going to be, I suppose, a theme of the video, is that what I want to be able to do is get through quite a bit in the time that we have for the videos, and then we can kind of revisit some areas later on and put those finishing touches to it. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to be using the flatten to foundation tool. And the reason for that is that it gives us nice even surfaces that we can then use. So we can then build on these. So we could make big areas where we could actually place rides and different things. But this is going to be purposed for a log flume. Well, not a log flume actually, just a flume. We'll come to a log flume hopefully in some future videos. So the plan that I've got here is to try and build a couple of areas, because what we want to do is we're going to be placing some pools onto some of these different levels so that we can start our flume at the top of Flume Mountain. That's what we'll decide to call it, and that will mean that there's somewhere for the flume to end into a swimming pool rather than A&E. So oddly, on the game itself, the guests are really picky about pathing. So if there's any kind of obstruction, or there's anything that you've missed, they just will not go along the path. But they'll quite happily, which they did in Amazonia, they quite happily went up a really steep path and walked for a good mile to go on a log flume which I created, which was an absolute death trap. So I'd not quite judged the speed of it, and the guests came flying off into a rock wall, brushed themselves up and got on with the day. So yeah. So we're going to try and be a little bit more genteel with this one. So the overall kind of aim, if you like, of the rides is you've got some of the prefabricated ones, and what you do is it kind of encourages you to build scenery around some of those rides, and that increases the prestige, so that if you're on the main playthrough of the game, then you can start hiking up your prices and actually guests be more willing to queue up or to actually go on those rides. So the second formation that I'm doing here, I just quite like the idea of the entrance going through a bit of a valley, and I'll just give you an idea of the size of the area we're dealing with. What I found on the career mode is because you need to make money to kind of expand options on the park, it's quite easy to put loads of stuff down in a very small area, and quite quickly it becomes really overcrowded. So I kind of gone to both extremes really. So one of the other videos that I did, I kind of focused purely on the infrastructure, trying to get around the whole park. So I did a monorail system, which took a little bit of time, and that's a kind of work in progress, because we've then got to create points of interest at each of the stations so that it actually makes the guests pay to get on the monorail in the first place. So we're going to flatten the surface, because the plan for this is that this first kind of raised area is going to be where the facilities are. So on Planet Coaster, we've done the wrong one there. So there's top tip number 1 is undo will be your best friend, I'm sure, as you play the game, and that is holding down square and pressing back on the directional pad. There is a bulldoze function, which is kind of a delete function, but it's a bit hit and miss in that sometimes it will delete a whole area or a whole ride, and then other times it will just delete kind of sections of it. So undo I tend to use quite a lot. So going back to what we're saying is that on Planet Coaster, in order for your guests to be able to use the pool services, they need a guest services kiosk, and they also need a changing facility. So I had spent quite a while making incredible swimming pools, or incredible to me at any rate, and wondered why nobody was interested, and I resorted to good old YouTube for guidance, and that's the reason. So the path looks okay. We've put a wooden path down. Ideally, I'd like an Indiana Jones kind of vibe for this, with some kind of rope bridge that gets us across, and a bit of a jungle theme going on. That, I'm sure, exists somewhere, particularly on the Frontier Workshop. And the Frontier Workshop, just to give a bit more information on that, it's essentially like an online shop which isn't monetized. So what will happen is anybody that's got access to the game can make creations, and they can then upload them, and then you can access them. So you can download them to your PS5 or whatever console you're playing on, and it's basically a blueprint so that you can then just put that straight down on your park. And there's some really amazing things on there. The only downside is that they are quite complex. So they've kind of, someone's painstakingly placed every tree, bush, everything. So One of my favourites was like a temple type ride, and that even had shops and things underneath and toilets. So, you know, someone had spent an awful lot of time making that. And whilst we're on that subject, actually, one of the options, which we'll see hopefully at the end of the video, is that once you've built your ride, you can actually, through one of the camera options, you can ride it. So that's quite a nice feature as well. So what we're trying to do here is create the feeling of that rope bridge by putting some railings on and not doing a particularly good job of it. So bear with me, because we've got some path extra options here, and it's coming up with some interesting angles there. So just as I'm going through, what the video is not going to be actually is me going through all the kind of controls, technical aspects of it, but I will explain bits of it as I go through. So you could see that when I was placing the pathing down, at some points it went red, and that's because it is too steep for the guests and it won't let you place it. Or if there's intersecting terrain, then it won't let you place it either, which is actually really good because you don't want to spend ages putting a path in and then the guests can't use it. So I think I've done something wrong here, because I seem to have placed an awful lot of bins across that path. And I think what I've done is I have chosen the wrong option. So I've actually turned railings off and put path extras on, thinking that was railings, and it's actually the bins. So that's something that we've learnt together. So that means let's get rid of that, and third time is a charm, as they say. So we'll pop our path back in. And actually, what I found, so we'll sort this out once we've placed the path down, is the reason that I tend not to use the railings is that it puts a railing at the end of the path as well, which blocks it off to the guests. But we'll place that down, and then I'll show you how we're going to rectify that. So I'm making this look an awful lot more complicated than it is. What I would say is, until you get used to it, the pathing can be a little bit frustrating, but just stick with it. I'm sure there's loads of different options on there regarding how the path can be, kind of the suggested path, should I say, will be shown. I tend to stick to what I know, so I'm using the line builder, and I'm going to use the stamp tool as well a little bit later on, and that just allows us to cover bigger areas a little bit more quickly. So I want to extend the path up to the top of the mountain here, and as you can see, there's railings on either side of the path which is going to block it. So I'm not really sure why anybody would want to do that, but it's easily rectifiable. So we can just add an extra section of path in without the railing on, and if I'd put it down properly the first time, then I wouldn't have mentioned any of that. So there we go, it happened for a reason. So quite happy with that. We've got two different areas. We've got our pathway going across the top, and that means that we are ready to place down our flume. So for that, as with any of the options, you've got a lot of preset kind of or pre-built ones, and none of them are really going to be suitable for the space that we've just created there. So I think what we're going to do is create a custom flume, and then we've got a couple of options there for the style, and I'm thinking that the blue one is going to look quite good. So we need to place the platform so that we can get the steps to it on there, and also leave a little bit of space for some queue pathing as well, because otherwise there's quite a lot of bottlenecking. So we can choose where we're going to start our flume, and we can actually run more than one off this platform. I'm not sure exactly how many. I've had two off here before, But I suppose we could put two platforms side by side and have a couple of them going. But let's just focus on one for now, because the aim for this video is to get our first flume down and get a guest riding the flume, and then we'll do that ourselves and we'll know that it's all working as it should. So you can see here that I can change the angle, and there's a couple of different options for the type of tubing as you go down. So we can have the covered tube that we just popped in there, we can have high-sided ones, and we can also have transparent, which will actually be quite interesting here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to work it around the mountain side that we've created here. One thing that I have noticed is with the path in general, if you take it through terrain, it will automatically tunnel for you so that there's enough room for the guests to walk through. That doesn't happen with the log flumes and any other kind of tracked rides that you create. It won't stop the ride from working, but it just looks wrong in my opinion. So what I tend to do, which we'll probably do once we come to finessing this, is we can actually use the terrain builder on the terrain tool to make some tunnels and things, and that way we increase the prestige of the ride, which is what I mentioned, is makes our guests enjoy the ride more. So we don't really need to worry about that those sort of aspects of the game at the moment. And even on some of the other playthroughs that I've done, if there's something that I've created that doesn't seem too popular in the grand scheme of things, then I just put the price down to 0, because I don't need to make any money because the cash option isn't enabled, or the cash management tool should I say. So let's finish off our flume here. That looks like it might be a bit steep, but we're going to need to finish the flume with an end piece. That looks a bit high at the moment. The runoff quite nice, but it's not going to work for what we need here. Maybe we'll utilise that a little bit further on. So I think we just need to add an extra piece before we finish our flume, just to make it a bit of a shallower descent. And that piece there is to actually push the water up, so you can have your flume going back up again as well. But I'm not going to make it too complicated for now, because as I say, the plan is to tackle one area at a time and make sure that it's operational and try and fill the whole park, and then we can come back and see what we can do to finesse things, because we can still change the type of log flumes as we come back later. So it's closed at the moment. What we can do is we can test it, but I've managed to go on to the different option. So what we need to be able to do is place the entrance, which should be on the editing bit. So we need to do that on here. It doesn't seem to be coming up as an option. Bear with me. So actually I think what we need to do is actually click on the flume itself rather than just the platform there, because we need to place an entrance so that the guests can get to it. Whilst I make a hash of this, what I'll do is I will talk about the channel in a little bit more detail than the plans for it. So this is the first video in a series of the Planet Coaster 2, and I'm also planning to capture some other games that I'm currently playing. So there's a game called Deliverance 2 that recently got released, which is a medieval open world game, and I actually went searching for not Medieval Dynasty, I played that one as well, for Deliverance 1, and actually it was just £7, so I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. It's actually a really good game, so It's open world, but it's not too complicated, because some of the games are almost too big. So I like my playtime, if you like, is usually in hour chunks or something like that. So if there's something where I'm going to get sidetracked with a mission and not have done it 3 hours later, I'm just never going to progress. So Deliverance was actually, it's more story driven. I've put it on the easier options just so that I can kind of get through the game, get the experience of it without too much challenge. So I'll capture some of that. It may be, we'll see how it goes. It may be that I just carry on from where I am, because a lot of the games that I'm playing, they're not going to be recently released, and I'm not an established channel that gets early access, so it's not going to be sneak peeks. It's just going to be me kind of going through the games that I play, uploading them and seeing what gets the interest, really. So I will upload some of that, and also I play a bit of VR as well. So the Oculus Quest 3, I am currently playing Contractors Exfil. So I did try and capture a bit of the footage on that, and honestly the quality wasn't very good from the method that I was capturing it. So I will tinker around with that until I can get something that I feel is okay to upload. I also bought Saints and Sinners 2 because it was on a Valentine's Day sale, oddly. But that was just £5, and that is a very good game for £5. They've really bumped up the graphics from the first one. Anyway, back to this one. We obviously need a swimming pool for this flume to splash down into, and for that I'm using the stamp builder. So again, there are prefabricated pools that come with different things. It'll probably come with a lifeguard and a bit of scenery around it, but we can add that separately. So I just want to keep things nice and simple for the first bit of the build. It's about function first, and then we'll add some more interest to it. So I'm quite happy with that, and I'm a bit of a fan of the hexagon shape there. So as you probably saw while I was talking about different games, there's a couple of different pathing tools and pool tools. They work kind of similarly in that you can kind of freehand it, or you can you can use the stamp builder to cover areas more quickly. So we need now to focus on this area here, because what we need to be able to do is get some pathing to get up to our little, I don't know why I wanted to call it a drawbridge then, because it's clearly not, our walkway there. And I like the idea of that for the park in general, of having different heights and areas where getting around from A to B is also a bit of an adventure as well. Depending on how it goes, I could try and put another transport system in, but the overall plan for the initial stages are that we're going to have the entrance path. We're going to use the tunneling tool to go through that first kind of mountain that we created. And also, which I haven't tried yet, but it came to me in a bit of a brainwave yesterday, is that we could actually use the tunneling path to get down underground, and then the terrain tool to create an underground swimming pool. I quite like the idea of that, and then we can mess about with lighting and things like that to make that a nice little area. We don't want to just plonk things down. We want to make it a little bit more interesting. So we don't want to make this too steep, and I don't want to, let's go around and what I don't want to do is that little covered area, I don't want to kind of encroach on that, because I want to make a little pool in there as well. So we just want to, for now, connect the path in, because this video is already a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I want to keep them to around about 20 minutes for most of the videos. But as I say, the aim is to have something that is a section that's finalised. So we got 3 entrance paths here. I'm just going to connect this end one so that the guests can get to our first flume. The middle one I am hopefully going to, as I say, path through the mountain, and then the third one we basically need an exit as well. So even on the sandbox mode, you can probably see on the top left hand side of the screen there are some prompts that give you kind of hints and tips about what might not be working and why. So for these particular play that we're doing at the moment, we don't need to worry about electricity and water filters and cleanliness and things like that. But we will go around the path in, that needs to work. So any obstacles that are on there, we'll get rid of those with the delete option there. There we are. We could probably get through the bushes there, but we'll just take those out just in case. And as I say, the undo button is massively helpful because it's not unheard of for me to click delete and take out huge swathes of things that wasn't what I intended. So our guests are already on the march, probably because there's only one place to go at the moment, although that currently is a dead end because they've got no way to get onto the log flume. So let's sort that out. And we do need to put those facilities in there, the changing room and the guest services, so they can buy pool passes and get changed into their swimwear. So for this we can use the prefabricated ones. So you generally find that you're going to have 3 options in terms of style. So you've got the Planet Coaster ones, you've got Mythic, and you have Viking themes. I think the others are DLC, and for me there's plenty enough on here that I don't need to get the DLC, because I believe what you can do is you can then go and look for shells. By that I don't mean walking along a beach and looking for them. I mean that there's kind of shells that you can drop over these blue boxes to keep them in the theme of what you're doing. What I have noticed is I've dropped that one in and it's got the icon to say that I don't have power for it, so I've not actually turned off the power management option, but we can do that on the fly here because we're on the sandbox. We'll just turn that off. On the full game, if you like, you've got all kinds of things to consider. So you've got like condition, things degenerate over time, and you've got to send a mechanic, and if you leave it too long it just breaks down completely. And you can make staff paths so that only the staff go to the dodgier areas of the park, the maintenance type areas. It can be quite in depth. It can be what you want it to be, really. Whoops, our guests have turned back round in disappointment, so we better get some pathing down. So let's use the stamp builder for this one. So this isn't going to be too pretty to start off with, but we'll come back to it when we get around to finessing. Let's just get this thing up and running. Whilst we're doing that, it'd be lovely to see people adding comments. It's the start of a new channel, and I've always made sure that if people take time out of their day to watch the videos and have any comments, any questions, that I be only right to take the time to respond. My other channels, I know only because I've mentioned it, are a little bit different in that I was barbecuing whilst the Great British weather allowed, and I was just filming them as kind of hopefully hints and tips. So it was a Ninja Woodfire barbecue, and actually they started picking up views. So there's quite a few of them, and I had a channel, or have a channel, called Stop the Tape. So if that's of any interest to you, then by all means head over. There are a couple of videos that I put on there of a few places we've been, because I I use YouTube quite a lot to get information. So if we're going on a short stay somewhere or even abroad, it's lovely to be able to have a look at those places and see what you're getting before it happens. Back to this channel, and we need to open the shop so that our guests can get in, and they're already on the way. And going over to the changing rooms, which means they'll be ready for our flume. And once they've done that, I think that will just about do it for episode 1. Here comes our guests. If you've stuck with me for almost half an hour, I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching them walk across a bridge in real time. So there is an option to speed up the time on the game, which we'll do. There we go. And as if by magic, off they go across the bridge, and then we'll slow them down once they've been round the path and they're ready to go on the flume. Here we are. So, half an hour, we've done a fair bit of landscaping there. We've got our first flume in, which we've designed ourselves, and it's all working as it should. We got our first guests climbing the ladder, eager to go. There we go. First one's going. Off they go. Wow, that's fast. And safely into the pool. The second one's already on the way. So then, let's ride the flume ourselves, and then I'll wrap up episode 1. And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in episode 2 and beyond. Any suggestions? Pop them into the comments. And once again, thank you very much for watching.